during the time of our meeting, and if you wish to not have your face recorded, then you may want to drop off the cameras as well, but I'll leave that to your discretion. Okay, fine, recording is on. So, introduce myself. My name is Marty Chakravarti, and I am from a company called iDocs, and we basically provide the EHC Hub, which is one of many solutions that iDocs works with. And the EHC Hub, at this point in time, the context, it's being used by the Nottingham City Council and over 20 other local authorities across the country. The emphasis for our session today is on looking at the EHC Hub as will be used by professional contributors. When we make the reference to professional contributors, basically we are looking at professionals who may be across education, could be social care, could be health. Basically, you have been, as a professional, been invited to provide advice towards the needs assessment for a child or a young person. So that's the context to why we are together today. I realize I'm not sharing my screen, which I need to rectify immediately. So there we go. I would have been talking avidly about things that you had no visibility to, so I'm glad I caught that early. Right, so let's move on then with what we are basically going to be doing today. A bit of housekeeping, as Sinead has already set the scene a little bit. Session is recorded, so you'll always have a point of reference to come back to. In terms of course timings, 90 minutes is what we've been allowed. I'm hoping we can go within that time frame. Sometimes when discussions come along, we may extend that a little bit. For those who do need to leave at the end of that period, by all means, you don't have to excuse yourself. You can leave and then perhaps pick up the remainder of the elements from the recording. But for those who can remain, thank you. We will continue to engage with you. I don't anticipate any formal breaks in our time together today. And in terms of safety, if there's an emergency where you are, please just leave the meeting. As described already, the session is being recorded. Microsoft Teams engagements, again, use the gestures to raise hands or to use the chat to put in your questions or comments as you wish to. I hope you can hear me clearly. I hope you can see the screen that I'm sharing, which is, I should have asked right up at the beginning. If either of those become compromised in our time together today, then you do need to let me know. In terms of my focus, my Teams meeting is in front of me. So that's where I have visibility of the chat, but my presentation and my engagement with the EHC Hub will be on a larger monitor, which is on the side here, which is why I tend to keep looking over on that side, just to explain that if you were wondering what was happening with my focus on the screen, as it were. So in terms of what I will be doing with you today, basically it's a demonstration. And the demonstration of the hub will be via a local demonstration system that we have. I expect as I take you through that experience that it will spark some sort of discussions with yourselves or, in your mind perhaps. Please don't hold on to questions as they pop into your mind. Do share them either by using the chat or raising your hands, and we'll see if we can give you an opportunity to ask those questions as we go along. There are user guides within the EHC Hub, and they're accessible via links that I will show you how you can get to them, so you don't have to reach out to external sources to get reminders of the principles that you'll be learning in our time together today. So to kind of just set the context a little bit about what the EHC Hub is. At the moment, it's just an acronym, perhaps to yourselves, but in essence, we are looking at the Education, Health and Care Plans Hub that has been designed to help manage EHC plans for children and young people. It enables parents, carers, local authority case coordinators, professions across education, health, social care, to all come together and engage, contribute, and collaborate towards the EHC needs assessments, plans, and reviews for children and young people. Basically, it's a website. So as a website, it can be accessed using any device, such as a computer, a tablet, a mobile phone, essentially anything that has an internet connection and a modern web browser attached to it. So that will enable you to get onto the EHC Hub. All the user accounts within the EHC Hub are secured by an email address and password and an extra unique code, which the Hub will send to you, basically following a two-factor authentication protocol. lots of words in there, but in essence, you will get a number sent to your phone or to your email address. You feed that back into the system, and it just confirms that you are the correct person gaining access to the system. I think that's important given that, there's such a lot of sensitive information within this portal, and we need to make sure that that's well controlled. Access to that is well controlled. It also aligns with the Special Education Needs and Disability Regulations of 2014, but I'll explain that in a little more detail as we go. So how does it work? Basically, the hub is designed to keep the child or the young person right at the heart of everything that is happening in terms of the EHC process. And it effectively supports the golden thread of information principle, ensuring that key details that are carried, that are submitted, are carried right through the process. So prevents family members, professional contributors having to repeatedly provide the same kind of information. There is an automated workflow, which basically streamlines the whole EHC process. Subsequently, it will improve your efficiency, your productivity, and your transparency, making sure that clear, accessible, timely information is provided for children and young people who have SCN requirements. In summary, it basically centers on the child of the young person. It facilitates collaboration. It will promote transparency and best practice. It supports compliance and statutory timelines, and it will provide significant time and cost savings. So basically, the hub supports, that's the word, the two major statutory pathways around the EHC plans. So case coordinators in the local authority will typically have the opportunity to manage every step of the 20-week assessment and planning pathway. So from the point of receiving the request for an SEN flag, as it were, for a child, to making a decision as to the viability of going into an assessment, the fact-finding part of that process. As part of that process, they will reach out to the likes of yourselves, the professional contributors, who will then submit your advice and your views subsequently as to, how to best help a child or young person's needs. A decision based on all of the advice that's been collated, and then subsequently whether or not to issue an EHC plan. If there's one issued, then the whole process of engaging with the draft and the subsequent finalized version of that EHC plan, as the case may be. So that will be the 20-week assessment and planning pathway. Typical responsibility there would be within the local authority. Subsequently, it will enable us to help manage the entire review pathway process. Usually the SENCOs, the settings environments, will pick up on this. They will arrange the meeting details. They will solicit views. So this is when you will be reached out to again as a professional, asking for your views on the effectiveness of the plan that was already in play for the child or young person. Is it, fit for purpose? Does it need adjustment? Are they on target? All of those sorts of opportunities for you to comment on. Subsequently, perhaps an attendance at the meeting, and then all of that information, the SENCO and the settings environment will collate all of the facts pulled together in terms of the review process and produce a report. That report will contain a recommendation to the local authority as to the viability of the plan, whether it is to maintain the plan, whether it is to amend the plan, whether it is to cease the plan. Local authority will then examine that recommendation following all of the facts, and they will subsequently, either iterate through creating new plans, as the case may be. The final aspect that the EHC Hub will enable us to do is also to manage local decision panel meetings. So whether you're a part of those panel meetings or as the case may be, local authorities have an opportunity to manage that as well. Just to be clear, for our purposes today, we're only going to focus on the 20-week assessment planning pathway, and more particularly your engagement as professional contributors within that aspect. So your question, Matthew, is how are contributors identified? So basically, the local authority will have a list of those individuals or teams that could be reached out to for advice giving, as it were. and they will send out an invitation, as in they will include your name on the EHC Hub, and that will in and of itself trigger an invitation for you to register on the Hub. I'm going to take you through that journey in just a moment. So where they are not already included by the local authority, there are other avenues by which we can invite professionals to come into the engagement with the EHC Hub. So perhaps I'll say this, just hold fire for a few minutes, Matthew, and I hope it becomes very apparent. Okay. Right, so let's move through. Basically, the EHC Hub is not something we just dreamt of and, brought to the table, as it were. It has been co-produced with over 20 local authorities across the country. We take feedback from everyone who uses the Hub, including yourselves in time. And basically, it's this feedback that informs us where it is we need to work on improvements, bringing in new features, how we can keep the system up to date and ensure that it continues to deliver the most use for everyone that needs to use it. Every local authority, every individual has a voice in how the EHC Hub is developed, maintained, and improved moving forwards. In terms of what we will be doing today, the core agenda is to give you an introduction to set the context of the EHC Hub. I've basically done that in the last few minutes. Once we get into the EHC Hub, we will get to understand what the environment of the EHC Hub looks like, how we can move around the concept of a work tray, and how we can then specifically engage with providing advice towards an EHC needs assessment that we have been asked to provide. Once that active engagement is completed, then there's the ability, whilst we're still engaged with that particular case, to look at the decision of the notice of the decision, whether it's viable to issue an EHC plan, to actually view the draft EHC plan as it develops, and then to view a finalized EHC plan as well. Now, as professional contributors, you might be an individual working in your own merits, as it were, or you may be a part of a team. If there's a part of a team and the team has been reached out to, perhaps the SALT or the speech and therapy or social care, whatever the team is, if they are reached out to provide advice, then there is a team manager responsibility within the EHC Hub as well, wherein they can make those allocations to individuals. Understandably, the team will not provide the advice, but an individual from the team will provide the advice. Okay, so moving through, that's kind of setting the scene for what we'll be doing. How do you get your engagement with the EHC Hub? Once your details are captured within the EHC Hub environment by the local authority, you will be sent an email from the EHC Hub. The tone of the email will not be dissimilar to the one that's on display at the moment. It will reference you. It will reference you by name. It will give you an opportunity to click on a button, the green one on my screen, which will basically say complete your registration. Clicking on that button will take you to the EHC Hub website, within which you will put in a password that you will use for your secure access to the EHC Hub. You will then add whatever it is you wish to use as your two-factor authentication process. It might be that you opt to have a code sent to your mobile phone as a text message. It might be that you opt to get the code sent to your email address that is used to register you onto the website, or it might be that you've downloaded an app from the App Store or the Play Store, which is an authentication tool which generates a number, or will you be given a number to feedback into the system, basically. So you decide how you want your 2FA to kick in, and that's basically registration. There's no greater details than that. It's a very simple process. You would have a short window of time from being sent that invitation to responding to it, as in it'll normally be a 24-hour slot, within which time you need to click that button. Should you fail to meet it within the 24 hours, you just need to get back to the local authority and ask them to, reinitiate that request for you. And it's within their gift to be able to do that for you. Once you're registered on the EHC Hub, it takes you straight. It takes you straight in, and then you have the opportunity to engage with the environment. And we're going to go there in just a moment. Now, it might transpire that we're a little down the road, and you are already registered on the hub, but need your engagement on the hub. The way that would work is that you would be sent an email from the EHC Hub as soon as you are nominated as that person that needs to provide the advice. Again, you will get an email, something along the lines of the tone that's on the screen right now. Request for advice towards an EHC needs assessment, dear contributor, da da da, and you will be sent the EHC case reference. You will never in these communications from the EHC Hub get the details of the name of the child, the status of the case, any details that may be compromising will not be shared within this. All you will have is the case reference number and the opportunity then to trip a button to get into the EHC Hub. Clearly, that's not the only way in. You may already have that saved as a shortcut on your browser, and you can just click on that button and you get into the EHC Hub. Put in your email address that was used for registration, put in your password that you have set for yourself, and then put in the case reference number once you're in the environment so you can find that specific case that you have an allocation for. So that's broadly the presentation area, if you like. What I'm going to do now is take us into the EHC Hub.
Marty,
Yeah,
really quickly,
questions.
Philip Gandy, why 24 hours and does it really work when so many advice givers work part-time?
It's a feature of the system at the moment.
Yeah.
That window of time will basically it's not a limitation. It's a mechanism of keeping control that invitations aren't left pending once they've been sent out to people. So we don't leave it. Again, we're trying to keep it as secure as we possibly can. I appreciate, Philip, the 24 hours might seem like a limitation, but it really isn't because you've received that invitation, you haven't responded to it. It's a message back to the case coordinator at the point in time, to a member of the SEND team at the point in time when you're able to engage with the EHC Hub. They perhaps would enable it for you relatively promptly, and then you can log back in within that window of time. I wouldn't see that as a limitation. For our side, it's just making sure that we are keeping as tight a control over who can come in and do what with the system in a timely way. Okay. Any other questions in here? I believe some have been responded to already. Okay. Right, so let's go into the EHC Hub. I'm going to dismiss the presentation. And I'm going to take us into a web browser. I'm using the Microsoft Edge browser, but you could use anything that's convenient for you, Safari, Chrome, or whatever is applicable in terms of your preference. Once you've put in your web address, as it were, this will be conveyed to you as part of that invitation you have received. You would enter your email address that was used for your registration. You will put in your password that you have set. Just to be sure, nobody within the system has visibility to this password. This is yours for your eyes only, as it were. And once you're in, if you have forgotten your password, you will trip this button on the screen. This will basically send a link to that email address, and subsequently with that link, an ability for you to reset a password if that's what you needed to do. Once your credentials are in, you're going to hit the login button, and that's going to open up the EHC Hub environment. So this is what that looks like. Just to introduce you, take you around the environment. The top part of the screen is made up of the branding that tells you that this is an iDocs product, gives you the name of it. It tells you which local authority this is associated with. Just to be clear, and we had these questions come through in sessions with other communities that we've presented to. If you have an engagement as a professional contributor with another local authority, then you would need a new account, so to speak, for each local authority that you're engaged with on the EHC Hub, because each database is a separate entity of its own. So the one that's for Nottingham City Council is just theirs. No other local authority has visibility to that. So it's not harnessed in some sort of a big environment in the background. These are siloed versions for each local authority. So everyone that you're associated with, you're going to need to get your credentials for, basically, and be registered for that database. Right. So that will be the branding, informing you which local authority you're engaged with, the cases of. Further along will be who you are within the system. I've annotated, there are different communities that would use the system. I've annotated all with my name and the community that I belong to in this instance. Underneath this, if I was to click on that button, it will open up my profile. In fact, basically informing me what my name is spelled correctly, perhaps an opportunity to adjust that, the email address that was registered for the account, my job title, my mobile number if I'm using the 2FA, and my preferred method of contact, and then subsequently an opportunity if I felt the need to make a change to set a new password. I would need to put in my current password and put in the new password that I wish to. Once I've completed that process, then I would go to the bottom of my screen, hit the save button, and that would have made the changes that I have indicated on this particular screen. Just some other bits of information in here will be how are you using your 2FA, whether it's a mobile or emails or an authenticator app, and just some headlines on when you last were in the system and when you last changed your password. If you don't wish to engage with the screen, then it's basically a cancel, which takes you back to the landing page or the dashboard that you will arrive in. Two other features along the top bar here. That is the help button I made reference to earlier. If I was to click on that, it basically replaces the screen with some links to documents and a video that will show you how you can provide advice towards an assessment. Appreciate that my agenda is a bit broader than just that one specific aspect. I believe that's a 3 to 5 minute video, which will be a refresher or a reminder of that one particular aspect of your engagement with, providing advice towards an assessment. So that's help. These will open up different tabs within which you will have the opportunity to get the engagement that you need. So if you also cover Nottingham City or other local authorities, sorry, Henlon, I'm reading your question here. Will the system look at the same as this? No, they all will look the same. In essence, the only thing that will change, Helen, will be the branding, telling you that. And what may change quite subtly will be the layout of templates that we're going to look at in a minute. When you download forms, for example, they will have the prescription of whatever the local authority is. But in terms of the system engagement, it will be exactly the same, regardless of the local authority you're engaged with.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Right. The last aspect of this is the ability to leave the system. You're done for the day. You can hit that button, yes, log out, and that's the end of your journey at that particular point in time, or you can change your mind and continue to work within the environment. Just a quick indicator, you'll note that my cursor, as I move it along the top bar there, is an arrow. Once I put it over certain features, it becomes a finger. It's a suggestion there is a button behavior underneath that. So a click on that will basically initiate your home screen again, and a click on that, as you noted, will bring your profile up, etc. So wherever you see the finger, it means there's an action just underneath that part of the screen. Okay, so what else do we see on the screen? On the left-hand side, there will be a My Cases tray. If you are a team leader, and only if you're a team leader, you will also have visibility to Team Cases tray. For the most part, you will only see the 1, 2 icons on the left-hand side. You will probably not see the third one, or should I say the second one. You will see My Cases. In my profile, in the demo environment, I am a team leader so that I can complete the entire experience, if you like, of using the EHC Hub. So what do these trays contain? The My Cases in Progress tray will contain all of the records of children or young people where you have been asked to provide advice for as a named individual. So that's the visibility that you get. These children could be in any of the 2 pathways. They might be part of the assessment, they might be part of the review pathway. But the point is you have an engagement directly with these individuals and to provide advice or to provide your views on the effectiveness of a plan that has already been declared for them. So that's what you get to see in the My Cases in Progress tray. For those who are team leaders, this will be the records of all of the children who are part of the team that you have responsibility for. Just to explain, in my profile within the demonstration environment, I've got responsibility for all of the teams. So effectively, any children's records that have been solicited for advice show up in this particular tray. The behaviors of the tray are exactly the same in both of the scenarios. So I'm going to describe those to you next. When I'm working within My Cases in Progress, perhaps my interest is to go to that one specific case that I was asked to provide advice on, at which point I can go into that particular field and put in the case ID that may be conveyed to me via email, or if I wanted to search by the name of a child, then I will put in the name of the child. Once I've indicated what I'm looking for, so if I'm going to go look for all of the Smiths within my system, I hit my search button and I will find the records that match that particular criteria. If I wanted to clear my results out, I hit the clear button. It's as straightforward as that. So it's either the case reference number or the name that you could put into this field to look for a specific record that you need to have engagement with. Adjacent to that is another button called filters. And as I click on filters, you know what happens. You note what happens is it basically spreads open a panel through which I can engage some sort of filter behavior. If I click on that again, it collapses the panel. And this kind of behavior within the EHC hub of opening and closing sections down is quite prolific. You're going to see this quite a lot. And it's just a way of managing the amount of information that you have visible on a screen at a point in time. So the normal engagement with filters would be an ability to narrow down the records that you've got to work with. You could go and filter down against all of the various statuses that a record could have within the EHC hub. It could be that it is an assessment which is in progress. It could be that there is a decision to issue a plan that is pending. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but there's the idea, is I can pick up the status that I'm interested in. So just as an illustration, is there assessment in progress? Are there any of the records where an assessment is still in progress? Once I engage, I need to come down and use this button with the filters. That button is for the search. This button is for the filters. Update results, and all of the children's who are assessment in progress now become visible to me. In a similar fashion, I could mix up my criteria. I don't have to work with one at a time. If I wanted to mix criteria, I will ask the system to show me all of the children who are assessment in progress as a status within the hub, but are also from a particular setting, St. Mary's School in this particular example, update my results, and that will narrow down my results. And I can continue to engage with other mechanisms, if you like. If I did not want my filters to prevail, I will hit the clear button, and that's all back to everything within my particular assignment. The last updated sense is a useful one, especially if you have a period of absence from engagement with the EHC hub. It might be that you've been away for a week or two, as the case may be, at which point you can come into the EHC hub. You can go and ask the system to show you any records that have had an update since perhaps a particular date. So from the 1st of April, any changes, those are the only records I want to have visibility of. Update my results, and anything that matches that criteria will then be made available for me. We can, in addition to using these filter selections, engage with the various tick boxes that are available: impending deadlines, overdue deadlines, mediations, children with various tags associated with them, where there may be tribunals in progress. So that's the engagement with filters. Just to keep in mind, the behaviors are exactly the same, regardless of whether you're a team leader or whether you're a professional contributor without the team responsibilities. If you were a team leader, just one subtle difference. As I open up my filters, there's one additional tick box available, and that's your opportunity to find all of the allocations, that requests that have come through basically to the team, but have yet to be given to an individual within the team. So engaging with that, updating your results, you will find that these are the children's records that have been advice has been sought for, but it has not been allocated to an individual. But again, I'll take you through the team leader journey in a moment. So that's basically the navigation around getting into the various records that you may have an interest in or have to focus on. Any thoughts, any questions on what I've shared with you so far? Okay, let's move through. The next point then is what happens within the record of an individual child that is on display that I have that responsibility for. What you will note is that there are several columns of information associated with the children. If a photograph has been provided either by the local authority and the parents' approval, then those are the images that will be indicated in here. Just to be clear, the fact that there are silhouettes in here are just the fact that that's what I found on the internet and I put them into the mix of things. These are just pictures, stock pictures that we've taken off the net. These aren't representations of anybody that's real. Likewise with the names, likewise with the story that goes behind these individuals. They're all made up fictitious stories, if you like. So how do I engage with a particular record? I can see that Susan, is an assessment in progress child. My engagement would be to click. You note that the only point where the pointer becomes a finger is as I go over the name of the child. That's the hyperlink or the button, if you like. Clicking on that will then subsequently open up an area for me to understand more about that particular child's engagement within the 20-week assessment pathway. I'll come back to this in a little more detail. How do I get back
Matthew,
to? Hi, yes.
sorry, there was a question by Matthew Jenkins, I believe. So
Mm.
it's with regards to how do we make sure that we're linked to their hub? So this is with regards to children in placement in the county. Is there a contact name there, please?
That we are linked to their
Yeah.
hub. Is there a contact name here?
Matthew
Um,
Jenkins, if you're there, I
Matthew,
don't
did
know if
you
you
want
want
to
to
elaborate on that question? I'm not
elaborate.
so sure
Yeah.
what.
Yeah, again, I suppose it's linked to the question that I had before, really, which is just about how do we make sure that we're not, because we don't sit within, for various reasons, we don't sit within the other CAMS teams. It's a bit hit and miss in terms of our involvement with EHCPs. So I just wanted to make sure that we, obviously, it looks like we can probably have some way of having input in the city, but I suppose it's just how do we make sure that we have some input for kids that are in foster placements in residential homes in the county, where obviously the responsibility will be with the county SEND team, presumably for the HCPs. Does that make sense?
So I think that's a two-parter, if you like. There's one which is a local practice related question, as in what mechanisms is the local authority going to use to make sure that you are a named professional for a particular child's case file. In the other side of it is the mechanics of your engagement with that. So my, if you like, experience or my responsibility is to take you through the mechanics of that level of engagement in terms of how the local authority makes sure that you are the nominated individual. That's something that perhaps they would need to comment on. Is that another
Kate has a
question?
question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks. It looks like we've
Is
got
that
a
okay?
contact name, so that's really helpful as well. That's
No,
that's
no,
that's
fine.
great. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Suzanne.
Susan.
Appreciate you. And there's a hand up as well. Kate, you have a
Yeah,
question
Kate.
or comment? Kate, you're muted, so we can't hear what you're saying. There you go.
Sorry, I was just trying to unmute. No, I
That's
was just going to say about the. I think obviously Matthew's question was answered, but I was just going to say that obviously the county and city hubs are obviously separate. So yeah, I could have provided Matthew with details for the county hub. That was all.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
But I've taken a note of that as well to pass on to the team.
Okay,
Thanks,
so
Kate.
your hand was up to help. Thank you, Kate.
Yeah.
We need more of you. Okay, let's move through. Can you lower your hand as well, please, if you don't mind? Thank you. Right, so let's go back to my cases tray just to finish up the storyline in here. When you're working with a set of records, the mechanics that you have in engagement with the system, in addition to searching and filtering, you can use some of these column headers to sort records against that particular column. So if I went down, for example, to the status column and I hit that button, it basically collates all of the ones that are of a similar status together. Similarly, if I went down to the last updated, the most recent is now sitting on top of the tree. As I click on that button again, the oldest record in my set is on the top of the tree. So basically ascending, descending. So that's the behavior we would have in the last updated, in the status, in the year group, in the name of the child. The columns that are not sortable will be the setting column. For the simple reason that it might be that a child belongs to more than one setting. So the system will then, struggle with making that allocation of which of those is the priority to filter against. So you don't have the sortability on the setting column. Similarly, on the alert column, because there could be several alerts. What makes an alert? Basically a tag associated with a child, something to do with deadlines, something to do with awaiting allocation, all of the sorts of flags that a particular case file may have. That's the indication that you get in here. So with the exemption of the alert and the setting, all of the columns have a sortability behavior as well. Right, so let's go back and get the engagement that we are hoping to have, just to explain where we are in terms of our journey so far. What we've done is we have looked at the work trays and got an idea of how we can navigate around the EHC Hub screens. And I hope that's fairly intuitive in the way in which I've conveyed it. So how are we going to contribute advice towards an EHC needs assessment? So this, if you like, is your core engagement once you kind of get over the mechanics of the environment and the novelty of using it it's no longer novel, if you like, then is your opportunity to go and get that engagement of providing advice. So I'm going to go into a record, these ones that have been prepared in the past. They're not anything new that I've created, so they'll be in various states of progress, if you like. But I can see that Victoria, as an individual, is in assessment in progress. She's a year 9 child. So I have been sent a communication which has included her case reference ID. In that email communication, I've logged into the EHC Hub. I've put the entry, I've put the case ID into the search, and it's now given me a record. I'm now going into the record. What do I see when I come in? The first part to make clear is up here is the journey of the 20-week assessment process. From the request, which has been completed, indicated in the green, to a decision being made and published, and to now being as part of the assessment part of the process. Now, we are still in the information gathering phase, so the local authority is still within the 20-week window of time, if you like. At some point, once all of the information that they need has been collated, they will then make a decision against with regards to the viability of taking this record over into an EHC plan or not, as the case may be, and then subsequently, if that is the case, to go down an EHCP preparation, then it will be the draft versions and the engagements right up until the final the finalized plan is then published, if you like. So that's what we see in that particular representation on top of the screen. The color coding, the gray obviously has not yet been completed. So if I was to touch those parts of the product, they're not going to do anything for me because they're disabled at this point. The greens are an indication that that part of the process has been completed. But if I was to click on that part, it becomes blue just to indicate that that's what I'm looking at this point in time. That's what I'm looking at this point in time. That's what I'm looking at this point in time. So that's the idea of the color coding on the various icons that you will engage with. Other bits of information on the left-hand sidebar, you will get an indication pictorially of the child or young person, if an image has been included for them, their date of birth, the year group, the case reference, and where are they in the process of the EHC plan, either in the review or in the assessment. When we come back in a subsequent session, I will talk to you about the review pathway, but for today, the focus on the assessment pathway. Underneath that, we will have visibility of all of the stakeholders that have digital engagement with this particular child's case file. So effectively, these could be members of the family. When we say family, we're looking at carers, guardians, individuals who have a responsibility on a familial basis with that particular child or young person. Details of who they are, you will not have visibility of their email addresses. That will not be shared with you. The local authority has that for their visibility. Who is the case coordinator within the local authority? So by the way, this could be a list of several individuals. In my example, it's just the one. Who is the case coordinator within the local authority? You will have their email address because there may be a need for you to go and have a conversation with them about something, and you have the ability to know how to connect up with them. Underneath the education setting will be which setting or settings is this child associated with. Some as one as a primary, others as secondary perhaps. And who is the named SENCO for that individual setting? So we will have visibility of that, but again, no ability to contact directly. We will though have the ability to contact the case coordinator. Each of these areas are collapsible panels. So if you wanted to, perhaps working on a mobile phone for whatever reason, you can just minimize the information. So you're not having to, scroll through a long screen, as it were. So you can collapse these things. Underneath the notes section, there is an indication of a timeline. If you were to engage the timeline, it opens up the timeline for that particular case file, telling you right at the bottom of the stack, when was that received, who submitted it, what date and time, and the various transactions that have happened for that particular case. So you have a blow-by-blow engagement that individuals and exactly what happened at that particular part of the process. So we can see that that's when the image was added. We can see, how this thing carried on in its journey through the EHC Hub process. So that's the timeline. To disengage the timeline, you are either at the bottom of the stack going to close, or you go to the top of the screen and there is an X. So either of those will take you back to the previous screen that you were working on. The other engagements that you get on the sidebar, sorry, didn't mean to scroll up there, just go down to that area. The other engagements that you get on the sidebar are key dates. And these are both retrospective dates and forward-looking dates, in as much as you know when the case began, you know when the decision was made to assess. To be fair, if that decision was not made, you would not have an engagement with that particular case file. When was the decision made to issue an EHCP? When does that need to be completed, should I say? And subsequently, when does the case need to be completed? So those are the two future dates, and those are the retrospective dates, if you like. And as the case progresses, different dates become part of that particular engagement on the sidebar. So that's what you get to see. Now, in addition to that, you may perhaps have caught sight of the fact that there is another feature available, basically the ellipsis encircled encircled, if you like. If I was to click on that, it gives me the opportunity to view details. What are those details? Let's go look. Those are basically information about the child when the application was initially made. So we get to see whether there are any tags associated with that child. We get to see their names. We note that this is not an editable space. It's just giving you more information should you need that sort of context. Their date of birth, their age, their year group. Further down, again, collapsible panels. So if I was to suppress child or young person's details, it then takes me to the next panel, which is child or young person's main contacts, basically family, involved professionals. So we get to see who they are, collapse that, education setting, or I can just keep scrolling down. So those are my methods of navigation, if you like. So within the education setting or settings, details about when they started, when they left, whether it's part-time, full-time, etc. So there could be several of these records associated with a particular child's case file. So that's your engagement with what's underneath the ellipsis, an opportunity, as it suggests, to view details. You can cancel. Again, it takes you back to your landing page for that particular child's case file. So let's go back and examine each one of these in turn and see what sort of information is held underneath here. Under this will be all of the details that were submitted at the point when this particular case was requested. So somebody, parent, could be a young person over 16 directly themselves. It could be a SENCO. It could be anybody with a vested interest in the SEN welfare of the child would have made this request. And here is the ability to go in and have a look. Was consent granted? Any limitations that were conveyed as part of that process? Who was the person that actually requested it? We see their details, child or young person's details, child or young person's main contacts. Again, note all collapsible panels or collapsible expandable panels, details of the child or young person's current education settings, any previous settings they were in, any important information about the child or the young person as provided either by the SENCO or by the parent, care, or guardian. So that's their opportunity to put that information in and your ability to consume that. Views of the child or young person, parent, carer, guardians, what's effective, what's not, any identified areas of SEN, either in the 4 areas or one of communication interaction or in cognition, learning, social, emotional, mental health, sensory and or physical needs, any supporting documents that were submitted, you'll have visibility of that as well. So that's your opportunity to go and look at the entire application process. And as a point of note, anybody that's on the sidebar has exactly the same privilege. So this is kind of why we're making sure that only the right people get into the system to look at what they need to. If you had a need for it to take this information offline, there is your opportunity to download that as a PDF document. Clicking that button will basically initiate a download, your opportunity to save or open, just to give you visibility of what that application form would look like. And this is where I said the variances may be local authority to local authority. Your form may look different for a different authority. That's a basic template that we are using. But all of that information that we've just seen on the screen can be now on a document. And perhaps the reason might be that you want to share that with the member of the family because they don't have digital engagement. Usually, though, those are taken care of by the SENCO and the local authority. Cut across to the decision. This is your ability to see what the decision was made by the local authority based on that request submission. When was that decision published and why was that decision made? And again, an opportunity to download the communication that was sent to the parent, carer, guardian, members of the family on the EHC hub, what that communication was. Same experience, you download it and then you get to see what the details are. Should this have been an adverse decision, which it isn't in my storyline, then whether there's been any mediation activity, tribunal activity, etc. Now, remember, the only reason you have an engagement with Victoria's record is because the decision was made favorably. So we're going to get across then to the point, the crunch point, if you like, of your engagement with the EHC Hub. So in here, you'll note that there's some guidance for you in terms of your ability to provide advice using the templated format of the EHC Hub. The guideline here basically says everyone being asked to provide advice, you must respond within 6 weeks. At the end of a 4-week period, with you having not responded yet, the EHC Hub will automatically send you a reminder to tell you that you have 2 more weeks within which to complete your submission. Beyond that, you will not get any other prompts, as it were. At the end of that process, the local authority has it within their gift to say, right, we're not going to wait for any more advice. People who we've asked have not provided it or have provided in a timely way. And then they would have to take the case on to the next part of the process. And then they have the ability to withdraw your opportunity to provide advice, as it were. Right, so other information on how to contribute advice. On this page, you can access the advice template. We're going to go into that detail. But more importantly, you can see who else has been requested to provide advice. You can also see information where the child or the young person, the parent, carer, guardians have recorded their particular views. The guidance is this. Please refer to this content to help inform your advice. So what we're looking at, as you scroll further down, you'll see there's a section in here which is completed, effectively it's the voice of the child that's represented in here, either by their direct engagement onto the portal or by engagement through a parent, engagement through the settings environment. So this is effectively the child saying, this is what's important to me. So as you go into that area, you can see what they've said. At this point, this child hasn't expressed any particular preferences. So if I go back out there, so where have they made a representation? Underneath this area where there's a green tick. They've said that there are some things that are working well at home and at school. As I go in there, I will say that's what they have said about that. Victoria says that these things are working well at home and at school. In similar fashion, just disengage that. I can run down to things that she enjoys doing, and these will be, again, an opportunity to open that. These are the things that she enjoys doing. Should she have submitted any documentation, pictures, a TikTok video, whatever it is, you would have visibility of those files within this area. I'll show you in a moment how you can have that same engagement with files. If you don't like this experience of crossing out, going back, coming back in again, then there is another journey available for you to go back to things that are important, things that she enjoys doing, and just cascade through those 8 tiles, if you like, that are opportunities for the child's voice to be captured. In addition to that, there's an opportunity for you to go and to look at the views that have been expressed by parent, carer, guardians. Again, we can see that they made some commentary in here, but other areas they haven't provided any views on, if you like. Same engagement. I can go in and say, this is what the father says is important, and there's an opportunity to cascade through and look at the other elements that have comments within them, if you like. So that is the guidance, as I suggested, is to go down and refer to this information that parents and the children have provided about themselves and use that to inform your decision making. So in the middle of the panel, requests for advice. So what is this about? This is your point of engagement. You get visibility of all of the professionals who have been invited to provide advice. We can see that Asenko was sent the request, and that's when the information was due. Appreciate that this is a training environment. Some of my timelines are kind of all over the place, so I hope you can bear with that. If you are a team leader, then in addition to getting that, through which you can go and find the cases that need an allocation, you would also get visibility to this. So I can see in here that the social care team, I'm team leader, has been sent an opportunity to provide advice in the case of Victoria. And it is enabling me as a team leader to assign a professional. So kind of break out a little bit. For those who aren't team leaders, I appreciate this isn't your core engagement, but it's not a big excursion. So I think it's a good time to do this. So let's imagine that I want to, as a team leader, assign the social care responsibility for advice to an individual. So I go in, and in here, part of the process will be is to first answer a question, which gives me a choice of 6 responses, 3 yeses, 3 nos. It's a mandatory engagement. Anytime I see the asterisks within a space or a field in the EHC Hub environment means I'm compelled to make a response to that question. So will you provide information and advice for this child or young person? Yes, because they are known, meets the criteria. Yes, yes, no, no, no. If it's a yes, then that's fine. If it's a no, then that becomes a mandatory space wherein I need to tell the people engaged on the EHC Hub why, as a service provider or a particular area of advice giving, I am not in a position to provide that advice. But that no is only mandated if a no field. Sorry, the details is only mandated if a no has been indicated. And again, we'll see that this behavior is quite consistent as we go through the system. So that's me basically saying, yes, I'm happy to provide advice. Now, this is me responding as the team leader, and I will say yes. And then I have now the opportunity of adding who that individual is that I'm going to send Victoria's case to. So as I click on this button, this will be a list of all of those individuals who are part of my team. So I want to send this over to Ian as a contributor. I will add Ian to the mix of things, and basically Ian is now a contributor, and he will be sent an email invitation from the EHC Hub with the link to this specific case, inviting him to click and make a submission. So that's me managing that part of the process. Now, what if the person that I want to give this assignment to is not part of the existing list? I don't need to pick up the phone, send an email to the local authority. I can come down and choose to add a new team member. Adding a new team member basically opens up a screen where you would put in their name, you would put in their email address, and you would declare their speciality, be it in education, social care, or health. Once their name and email address is included and you hit the add button, they will then be sent an email from the EHC Hub inviting them either to register or to give them the case reference number and inviting them to enter the EHC Hub, as it were. So you have a little bit of flex in here as a team leader to bring new players into the system if you needed that to be the case. Okay, so you don't have to have that consultation with the local authority. You can choose to change your mind, and you can add as many individuals as you feel the need to in this particular excursion. So what is the impact of Ian basically been given that particular assignment? As you go back on yourself, in fact, let me save this. I'm going to go back on myself. Okay, it goes back to the assessment part of the process, and I can see that within the social care team, Ian now, as a contributor, has a pending state where he has it says read, it should say edit, but that's kind of the same idea. He has the opportunity of providing advice. Because I'm the team leader, it's a slightly different experience for me, suggesting I could read what he's submitted, but otherwise it'll just be an edit in that particular scenario. So how then am I going to make a submission for advice that's been given to me? Let me find another record in here that will enable me to do that. We go to my cases in progress. So that was Susan's record. So let's go to Katie. And within Katie's engagement, I am going to, all of those opportunities are closed. So let me find another record. Apologies for this. Just going to back button on myself, and I will pick up Helen Walters. Right. So I can see that in Helen's case, as a professional contributor, I have now an opportunity to submit my advice. My engagement will be to hit the edit button associated with my name, and that will be the only edit button that I've got. As I click on the edit button, it now opens up the form, the templated manner by which I will now submit my advice for Helen's consideration. Two sections, requests for advice, just giving you some guidance on your timelines, telling you, the basically the statutory engagement that we have for this particular aspect. I can collapse that, I can open it. There's not a lot to do in that particular area. As I go further down, there's a request for advice and response details. You note as I scroll down, there's a lot of information now that I'm going to have the opportunity to engage with. But in addition to that, you'll note that there are 4 buttons. These are basically floating buttons that just stay on the top of the screen. And what they will enable you to do is to save the progress of your case, as it may be, to download the information that you've put into the screen up to that point in time in a PDF format, to submit it should you have completed your advice giving, or to go back on yourself and go and attempt something else because you're now done and you want to move on and do something that's different. So your engagement is just a point of note, actually, before I leave these buttons, there is no auto save on the system. So if you were to harness a whole bunch of information, but omit to hit the save button and lose your internet connection, then you will lose that content. So be mindful to keep coming up here and hitting that periodically So just in case something inadvertent happens, you don't lose your information. Right, so let's go and see what it is that I need to do. As the case coordinator has made this assignment to you to provide advice, they would have put in some sort of a guidance in there, perhaps, to tell you what it is that they require. Apologies again, that's just a random number of clicks on the keyboard. The question that you would first be asked is, are you providing a response on behalf of someone else? It's a yes or a no. If it's a yes, scenario here would be that there is an administrative assistant who is completing this form on your behalf. It's your advice, and they are representing your advice on behalf of Helen, but they're doing, the administration against it. If that's your privilege, then they will say yes, at which point they have to put in the name, your name as the professional, your job title. If, though, it is you with direct engagement providing advice on behalf of yourself, you would hit no, and that will know who you are on the system from your profile, and it will populate your name and your job title as conveyed within your profile. So those two mandatory or three mandatory fields are now completed successfully. Further down, various bits of information that are collated in sort of themes, if you like, as we go down. So you will note here that you're basically going to provide advice on or give an understanding of when did you first have engagement with this child, when did you first have contact with this child in your organization. So comment on 28 April 25. Okay, I'm just going to borrow that as an example. Just so you understand, your engagement within this field can be as elaborate as you need it to be. There is no constraint in number of letters or words that can be used in this particular field. There are some levels of formatting in as much as I can bold that, I can italicize it, I can underline it, I can scroll through it, I can undo my choices as I need to by toggling on those features. I can change the font size, and I can include ordered and unordered lists. If I wanted an unordered list, that would be my opportunity. If I wanted a numbered list, that would be my opportunity, and an opportunity to adjust the paragraph formatting. You don't have to type into these spaces. It might transpire that you've actually got this information already pre-prepared in another document somewhere. So no harm in you basically doing a copy from another area and right-clicking and dropping it into this particular space. The only good practice guidance I would give you is to say when you're right-clicking to paste, choose the paste as plain text, for the reason when we copy from different environments, there could be a concept of what we call metadata, which brings in all sorts of levels of formatting and stuff that we don't necessarily see on the screen. Sadly, these transcend as we go through the system, and the person who at the end of the line, the local authority, has the responsibility now of taking all of the advice that's been collated and preparing that EHC plan, as the case may be, gets a very garbled representation of information. So kind of as a kindness to them, the recommendation would be use plain text, but it's not a hard and fast. You can choose to do what you will, of course. So copy and paste is enabled and no restrictions in this particular space. And every field where you can comment, you have this opportunity. You note that there is a kind of a handle at the bottom of the frame, which if you wish to, you can open that up or shut it down as you need to. It comes in a predefined frame, but it's an expandable one if you wish to have it. So when did the child or young person first come into contact with your organization? Details of any discussions held with a child or young person. Details of any discussions held between the parents, carers, and your organization. None of these are mandatory, all opportunities. The more you put in here, the better informed the local authority is to make an informed decision. What has your organization already put into place to support the child or young person's needs? What has been the effect of what you have already done to support this child? So you will put in your narratives as you need to, and then you will come down to the point where you have the ability to comment on the areas of need, of SEN, and health and social care. Appreciate your engagement may only be with one or two of these areas, and the behaviors within each of these is exactly the same. It's a templated form of providing your advice, and it systemizes the information that you provide. In addition to that, should there be a need for you to include any files, then this will be where you would come to include files. Two journeys in here. One is to add files, which will basically open up your Windows Explorer, and with that, an opportunity for you to go and pick what it is you want to, and then include that. Another one would be to go into your browser, your Internet Explorer your Windows Explorer, beg your pardon, pick up your notes, and then you can just drag and drop them in here. So that will be your way of bringing things into the mix of things. So we know that there is a limit of 100 files. I don't see that as a limitation at all. Should that, for whatever reason, start to prove a challenge for you, then there's the ability for you to just take several files and zip them together. So you make one file out of several, and you can upload a zip file into the system as well. So lots of opportunities to put in information into this space. So let's go and look at the template engagement that we would have for each of these areas that we may wish to be or have the ability to provide advice on. I'm going to go into the CEN of communications and interaction. So as I open up the area, let's just scroll down, have a quick peek at what it is I get to do in here. Communication interaction, if a decision is made to provide an education, health, and EHCP, basically, this advice may be used in section B of the EHCP. Strengths, needs, relevant to communication and interaction. Any long-term outcomes to be achieved. Your ability to annotate the system and say, we believe this will be a useful outcome for this reason. Employment, friends, relation, community, good health, independent living. In addition, what are short-term targets you feel that would be needed to achieve this outcome? You can add steps as the case may be, declare when those need to be accomplished by. Remove them if you don't want to. What, in your opinion, your expert opinion, is a provision that would need to be put in place to help to achieve that particular objective that you feel needs to be a part of that child's focus, as you like, focus for that particular child. As you add a provision, it's a form. What is the support? Who will provide it? What ratio? How much? How often? You can add multiple provisions. You can add multiple outcomes. Okay, so there are opportunities for you to continue. And this templated format of building the story continues right through any of those areas that you may wish to engage in. So before we have that engagement, let me just run back up again. I will complete my engagement with communications and interactions by hitting the save button and hitting the X. And any things that I've annotated in here will be included and sent in through the system into the EHC Hub system for others, other advice givers, the local authority, the parents, carer, guardian, the young people who have digital engagement to be able to see what was said by you as an individual regarding that particular area. Of course, not until you hit the submit button. Until you hit the submit button, everything is just visibility to you as an individual, also perhaps to your team leader. Should you wish to have their engagement, they can have visibility of what you're doing, as it were. If I was to go into cognition and learning, exactly the same experience. Strengths, needs, outcomes, steps, provisions. Same concept in every one of these aspects, if you like. So in this particular scenario, I can't remember the profile I was in to provide advice on. So I would pick any one of these as an example. If I go into health, and let's imagine that's the area that I'm representing, then as I come up here, by the way, I can see, going down there, I can see what it is that I'm now going to say. What are the child and young people's strengths in this area? Yep, that's what their strengths are. That's what my professional advice suggests are their needs in this particular area. What are some long-term outcomes to be achieved? And there's some guidance on specifying what those might be, SMART objectives, for example. So here is an outcome that I'm going to declare, and that outcome is for good health, maybe also for independent living. So I will just click on those. If I say actually not for independent living, so it's a toggle on, toggle off. That's how you build more, representations. This list is as compiled within the EHC Hub itself. Once you've got your engagement, you then go down and ask or annotate the system to suggest that perhaps to help achieve that particular outcome, here is a step that we feel might be appropriate to take, and this is when we believe this needs to be completed by. When you're working with the date pickers, by the way, there is your opportunity to go into the various years, the various months within the year, the various dates, and just scroll down as the case may be, or just come back to today. You don't have to engage with the date picker. If you prefer to, you can just type in a date. So you can, indicate this as 28/07, 2025. So either of those are viable ways of engaging with date fields. I can add multiple steps if I felt that that was a need. I don't have to annotate when this completion needs to be, but if I wish to, just as the experience goes, I can add multiple steps. I can change my mind and remove a step. I can add a provision. When I'm adding a provision, this is the support that will be needed. Who's going to provide it? Let's imagine this will be the teaching assistant on a one-to-one, and perhaps, I don't know how much. So let's say 30 minutes. How often? Weekly. I haven't spelled that correctly, but I use my spell checker and that brings in the correct spelling. So that sort of engagement, I can add multiple provisions in exactly the same format, change my mind on that. I can add another outcome if I felt that that was appropriate. Okay, and you can complete this as extensively as you need to, or not, as the case may be. Adding files, we've done that. Remember to hit save as you go along. You can always go back on yourself. So let me say no as a prompt if you've left unsaved things on your profile. Let's hit the save. Let's go back on ourselves. And that effectively just leaves you in a state where you're now in an edit stage, as it were. You can leave this case, go away, do whatever else, come back in, open up this record. It will automatically bring you to the most current position of that particular case's progress, and you will go down and find what it is that you need to have your engagement with. Edit will bring back all of the information that you've put in so far, and you'll note that help now has a tick against it. And the reason that's been ticked is because you have put in your advice against that particular area. Similarly, let's imagine, just for the sake of completion, in there I have submitted something. Maybe I'm not going to be as elaborate. I'm just going to save that. I'm going to come away from that particular mod, and that's basically what would happen. So as these advice basically flows through into the case coordinator's desk, they have visibility of the only areas that they need to perhaps have an engagement with for the advice that you have given. So once you're happy, everything done, before I hit the submit button, are there any questions in how you engage with the templates? Hey, Sarah.
Don't see any. Okay.
Hi.
Go on, Sarah.
Hi. In that section there doesn't seem to be anywhere to put your psychological formulation that brings everything together for your advice.
So that's I would imagine would that be a file that you would include as an engagement?
No, it's not a file. It's
not a file.
It's us bringing together the overview of how all those kind of different sections, social, emotional, etc., interact with each other to impact the young person and their behavior presentation.
Okay. How would you normally collate that information? Local authority question? Where would you get that information submitted to yourselves?
I think, sorry, it's Kate from Assessments. I think obviously it's Sarah's probably referring to the current template that we have that we send out to the professionals.
Yes.
I don't know whether it's something we need to look at as to whether are we able to change this formatting that we're seeing here Or is that the standard?
As an enhancement request, this is not a personalization for a local authority. That will be
Yeah.
an enhancement request to say, we want this to be a new feature within the system, and then that will go through its, iterations of development and stuff like that. But that can be a recommendation that we would take. As we said, we're listening. Yeah, it's not something that will be currently configurable for you to have an
Okay.
additional space like that.
So I think it's something that that I can take back to the SEN team and flag as something that's been brought up, obviously, and we can look at where we would gather that information if we need it for the purpose of the assessment.
There's just been a comment from one of my colleagues to say that we might be able to upload our reports anyway, rather than completing all the boxes. So that might cover that. So
yeah, I think that is
yeah.
that is obviously a couple of things that we're still looking into.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. The kind of the only downside, thank you for that engagement, thank you for stepping in with that as well, Kate. The only downside with kind of throwing files into the mix of things is somebody then has the responsibility of going into those files, extracting that data and making it a part of, the EHCP consideration, as it were. But whether that's a limitation or not, I guess until we actually, taste that aspect of the product, I wouldn't know right now. But in terms of the templated engagement, that's the opportunity, and that's how you would basically flow through that process. Okay. Right. So what happens then is when you're satisfied that all is done, you then have the opportunity of hitting the submit button. As you hit submit, are you sure? Yes, I am. And now that basically is no longer your responsibility. It has now been discharged. So effectively, you will note that in here, Marty, the contributor, has completed that. You can go and have a look at what it is you submitted, but you can't edit that anymore. But it's not without forgiveness available, in as much as if you feel that you've forgotten to include something that perhaps might be quite crucial, that is an oversight on your part, or whatever the story might be, you want to add more to what you've already provided. In that case, it'll be a conversation with the case coordinator, a communication with them, asking them if they can please re-enable that particular advice giving. In this particular example, you'll note that the health team does not have the opportunity to assign to professionals anymore. All right, so that bit has been completed, as it were. So the only recovery from this is to get back to the local authority, and they will then open this up and it will put it back into a pending stage with the read annotation against it as is suggested in here. So subsequently you can add more and then submit again. The point you submit, it becomes a completed behavior, as it were, a completed flag against that advice that you were asked to provide. Now, the information you're given here moves forward and becomes part of the development of an EHCP, as it may not look exactly the same when you see it in the EHCP, because the local authority has the opportunity, if they wish to take all the advice given and to basically abridge them, compile them, edit them in some way, and make them consistent as part of the EHC plan that may be published. But in terms of your advice as provided by you, the format and the content of that will always be available in this part of the process, in as much as whenever you come back to the assessment part, you can see exactly what was said by you in that submission. Now, just to make you aware, you'll note that in some cases there are completed and in some cases there are reads. This is a slightly confusing case because there's such a lot of movement against it. The normal experience that you would have is that you would only have the ability to read a completed submission once you had made your submission. Until you have made your submission, as in sent your advice over, you would not be able to read the advice that's been provided by other individuals. And this is kind of a double blind in the system to ensure that you are not being influenced, in the decision, in the advice that you are providing. You're not being influenced by another professional's advice that they have provided. The only influence you would have, as indicated already, is to understand and hear the voice of the child and or the parents. Beyond that, your advice that you give will be yours. And once that's submitted, then you have an opportunity to go in and say, oh, what did, Chris Evans say? What did, in the contributor, say, and then you have the opportunity of going in and looking at what sort of information they've provided in terms of outcomes and provisions and steps, as the case may be. So that's your engagement done. You basically now will wait out until a subsequent communication comes through to you from the EHC hub. And that will be when the local authority has now collated all of these reports that have come through, all the advice has been sought and assessed, if you like, and then they would come to a point where they're going to now make a decision. So in terms of our engagements in this, we've done that. We may have an opportunity, should it proceed to issuing a plan, is to go look at the decision notice and then subsequently to view the draft and a finalized plan. So those engagements are literally view engagements. There's not much I can do with them. So let me take us to a case where we can see some of these in motion, as it were. Questions in here, that sort of goes against collaboration. Then don't we want to join up and have similar agreed outcomes rather than lots of conflicting ones? Sorry, Philip, I'm reading your question. Lots of separate advice as an example. So I would suggest what you do have, once you've submitted your advice initially, there is then the opportunity to go and to read the advice that others have provided. And if you feel that that merits a change of, the advice you provided, you could perhaps then communicate with the local authority, the SEND team, ask them to open up your advice again, and then you can enhance the advice you provided in light of whatever else you become aware of. So that's kind of, I understand the word collaboration, but I think there's at some point we need to make sure that people are working independently before they are exposed to other people's opinions, so that the biases are not kind of set into play. Again, it's a system. We can do as best as we can to mitigate against, adversely influencing each other's advice that you may provide. I hope that kind of helps a little bit, Philip, in your question. Right, so back then to looking at something that has progressed somewhere along the line. So if a draft EHC plan is now being prepared and not yet shared, then we can see an example of that in here. So if I go to look at Roxy's case, for example, I can see that she has a draft EHC plan that has not yet been shared. So basically a decision has been made, but as part of that decision, it would automatically have moved over to the EHCP stage, if you like. So from assessment, if I go back to assessment in her case, we can see that they didn't provide advice, whereas they did and they did. Okay, so I have the opportunity of looking at that. I can see the voice of the child, the voice of the parents, and if I was to go into the decision mode, I would have had an email from the EHC Hub telling me a decision has been made, and I'll come in here and I can see that the decision is to issue a plan. So this is why it is now progressing, if you like. Decision to issue on, the opportunity to download the communication, and then when you get to the EHC plan aspect, which is where you would land as soon as you go into that record, once a decision has been made, it won't stop there, it will bounce straight to that. And that's the messaging that you will get on the EHCP, basically saying the EHC plan is currently being drafted. You will be notified once a draft plan is available to view. So again, it's a waiting game until a timeline is passed and an EHCP draft has been issued for you. So let's go back and find an EHCP case where a draft EHC plan has been shared. So if I go into John's case, I will see again that here now are the component parts of a draft EHC plan. I can see in here that this is draft version 1, the most current version. I have the opportunity of going into each of the sections. Section A, all about the child and parent carers views, any SEN outcomes and provisions put into place, any health outcomes and provisions, any social care outcomes and provisions, social care needs, outcomes and provisions, education settings that have been consulted, any comments on personal budgets, your opportunity to download the draft either as a PDF or as a .doc, an editable document, download the communication that was sent to the parents, carers, guardians regarding, where the progress of this case is, and then any a visibility to all of the consultations that have been conducted for this particular application. So we can see when the draft plan was shared, when the comments are due by, so the parents have the opportunity of going in and making some additional comments if they needed to. It's parents, carers, guardians, basically, who have the opportunity of going in and commenting more if that's what they need to do. We also have visibility of the education setting that was consulted and an opportunity to see whether, what it is that they have said about their inclusion in that particular plan, etc. Right, there's a question on there. I see this has been recorded. Will there be some access to view this again? Yes, I believe it is a lot to take in, Sarah. You're absolutely right. I'm running at 10 to a dozen, as they say. But yes, there will be an opportunity to review this. Also,
it'll be sent forward with an FAQ. So any questions that you are asking in the chat will be answered, and that will be sent over to you as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to go back and rather not navigate through the assessment part of the process, maybe you wanted to just go and look at all the information advice provided, you can go in there and that will give you the visibility of all of the submissions that have been made by professionals. Again, this is a retrospect, so you get to see how we've come to this particular area and the information provided that makes up section K of that particular plan. So that's your engagement, if you like, with the draft version of the plan and the ability to bring them down. There's not much you can do to influence it once it's done. We also send plan a team specific form. Yeah, okay. Right. So at some point in time, there will basically the local authority, if it is deemed appropriate, will now in effect publish the plan. And then the status of this child's record will no longer be that the draft EHC plan is now shared. It will become that the draft EHC plan has been published. Subsequently, the status of that child's record will go from the assessment into the review stage, and the status of that case will become review pending. So if I jump up and go look at something that's in a review pending case, so perhaps simplistically, if I used a filter and find that and go down to review pending. So I can see that these children have an EHC plan that is presently in motion, and subsequently there will be an opportunity to engage with the review path of that pathway. When we meet again, for those of you who are in this training that are coming onto the subsequent one, which is the review pathway, that's where we're going to begin our journey, because that child's case is a pending review case. Okay.
Hi, Marty. Conscious that we've only got about 2 minutes to go. There's 2 more questions. One's come from
agenda done.
Yeah. So I don't know if we could just answer those.
How does the hub, sorry, Philip,
Yeah.
again, how does the hub decide which sections to lift from the contributions if 3 different professionals have said the child had expressive language needs, but in a slightly different way? Right. So basically, all of the advice that's provided gets cascaded through to the local authority. The SEND team will have visibility of all of the comments that have been made on the same templated screen. And with all of those comments that have been made, an opportunity for them to go into those exact same fields that you have that engagement with, and then abridging the advice that you have provided, or editing it or compiling it in some way. So they have visibility of that in their profile, if you like. I can take you to that profile to give you that visibility, but it might prove a little bit distracting. So take comfort in the fact that every bit of advice provided does not get lost in the system. It's there, harnessed, and the local authority then has the ability to compress or to compile all of that information. Helen, I agree. I tried to look the other day and was felt it was valuable to see education's entries. Okay, communications. Okay. So Helen, I believe your comment is addressed by the fact that before, whilst you're still in the assessment pathway, if I just to go back to the view of the pathway, whilst you're in the assessment pathway, you do have ability to read what other contributors have provided. And then as expressed, the opportunity to reach back to the local authority and say, could you just open up my advice that I've submitted? I want the ability to submit some more, or whatever it is And that will be a conversation you can have with them. So long as you're within that consultation period, as it were, the information gathering phase, you can continue to iterate through that.
That might be why. That might be why, because I think we were doing a case discussion and perhaps it had closed and we couldn't see. So that might be why it was a date thing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Not to worry. The final aspect just to convey to you is once you've submitted your advice, basically, once, if you like, the matter is concluded or whatever it is, your engagement with advice giving has been, is no longer required, you will have access to the case for 60 days. Okay, so it will be visible to you for 60 days. At the end of that 60-day period, basically your ability to engage with the particular child's case file will no longer be enabled, unless, of course, somebody kicks in a review part of the pathway and you're invited to the review, then that process begins again. So either the SEND course or the SEND team will basically initiate that process again. But you have a 60-day window of time within which you can harness the information that you need. Okay. Right, that is the end of our presentation or demonstration, as it were. I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes, pick up any other comments that you may have. But for those who have attended, thank you for your time and your attention. We'll meet again as circumstances allows.
Thank
Wish
you,
you well.
Marty. I'm gonna
You're
stop
welcome.
recording now.
That's fine.
But yeah, thanks for everyone who joined, and I'll be sending this over to you shortly.